When sample tracking gets complicated, FreezerPro keeps it simple. See how easy it is to integrate FreezerPro into your sample management workflow with this intuitive, user-friendly interface. Users can add a new manual freezer or connect Azenta automated freezers. We'll have this pop-up prompt appear here. We can enter in our freezer name, and even though the language says freezer and FreezerPro, and we'll talk about samples and vials, it's really all free text definitions. So you can enter or craft and track any type of storage entity and any type of samples or inventory that you want. For example, if you wanted to create a lab bench, or maybe you want to create some type of -80 freezer, whatever that structure may be, you have the capability to create it in FreezerPro. So let's add an example -80 freezer. And then we can assign different hierarchy levels to our structure. Now, when we're first creating the structure out of the box, we do have to be a bit uniform with what's available in this pop-up, but we can add and manipulate all of the structure level subdivisions, layers, and naming conventions. When we create this structure out of the box, we have the below naming conventions that exist in the drop-down list. If you don't see something that you would want to use, you could also free type in this respective field and also determine how many of that respective layer you would want to apply to your structure. So if, for example, I want to create a freezer that has 4 shelves with each shelf containing 5 racks and each rack has a couple of drawers on it, I could set up my hierarchy and then I can assign boxes to that last level of the hierarchy. So on all our drawers, what type of boxes do we want to appear and how many on the last level subdivision? With FreezerPro, there's a number of pre-configured box types. You also can configure and set up different box types in the settings and preferences under the box types menu. Anywhere from a 1x1 to a 100x100 in dimension linear grid layout. So let's say in each drawer we can fit 6 12x8 or 96 well plates or boxes. We can click Add, and then if we just refresh our storage area, it will go into alphabetical order. But we can see here we have our -80 freezer with my 4 shelves. Each shelf will have 5 racks, and each rack will have 2 drawers, and each drawer will have 6 boxes associated with it. With any of the different hierarchy layers, you can right-click and go to the bottom of the list to the properties, and then with this pop-up, you can edit or manipulate that respective hierarchy layer. Where on the freezer, shelf, and rack, I'll have the ability to edit the name, description, and barcode. And then on the box, before I add samples, I can edit the box type. So I do have the ability to have box types of different shapes and sizes on the same freezer structure. Now with FreezerPro, after we've configured our freezers or storage structures and our sample types, we're now ready to start adding samples. And FreezerPro has a few different ways we can add samples. One would be manually in the interface where we can select multiple positions by holding the Shift key. We can select rows and columns, we can select the whole box, and we could input that number of vials of a sample. And we also have the ability to import. So if you're currently tracking on a spreadsheet, we can help save that as a CSV file and then be able to import into FreezerPro with a few adjustments that may have to be made based off some specific column headers that FreezerPro requires. Today, we're just going to manually add some samples into the system and highlight multiple wells to talk about the samples to vials relationship and tracking. So let's select an example sample type here. We'll add a volume and then click Add. So now that I've added this sample, I'm going to have one sample with multiple vials because I highlighted multiple positions. This can also be done through an import, which we'll talk about in a moment. But we can see once I've created my sample with some number of vials, I'm going to get a few identifiers that appear. The first is going to be a large ID number, then the sample ID. So if I click across any of the vials or aliquots, they're all going to contain that same number. And then each vial or aliquot has its own unique barcode, RFID tag, and volume. So each individual vial has a unique identifier and are related to the same sample with its sample unique identifier. What that means is because these vials are linked together as related vials, so to speak. If I make a change on any one of these vials, like let's, for example, add a freeze date and add cells in one vial, I'm going to have these fields filled in not only on this respective vial or aliquot, but across all of the other vials and aliquots, no matter where they're located. Because again, they're linked to that same sample ID. But because we're tracking these all under the same sample ID, we're going to actually be able to track our total volume and our total number of vials in the system that are available in storage. And these two items, as well as a couple others, come with basic alerts that can be set in FreezerPro on a minimum vials count. We can apply an expiration date, we can apply a minimum sample volume alert, and we also can apply a freeze-thaw cycle count, which is a function in FreezerPro to check samples out of the freezer. All of this data can be searched and reported on in any combination where we have a barcode search allowing us to scan in or cut and paste a list of barcodes to search on. We could type into our live search to just have a quick overview of what some keywords may entail and what samples are assigned to it with the ability to jump to their locations. If we select any of those samples or vials, and we have the ability to search on samples and vials with our advanced search option on the right-hand side. If we click the magnifying glass, we're going to default to our sample search, where in our advanced search, we have the ability to set as many criteria as we want with our search, and that includes any of the sample and user-defined field data in any combination that we would want to search and report on. As an example, with the sample search, if I perform a sample search with this name, I can return all of my samples grouped together with the total number of vials. So I can easily see a list of all of those samples in FreezerPro, and I could generate a report which exports to a CSV file to then use that data if I need to, or store it for safekeeping. I can also click on the little arrow next to the magnifying glass, and I'll have a few different options to search on, where we can search on vials, boxes, subdivisions, freezers, and sample sources. Tests and shipments are optional modules that are available for purchase, so they likely won't be in your installation. But talk to your FreezerPro sales representative if you want to learn more about the optional modules with FreezerPro. So if we click on the vial search and we run the same search that we just did with our samples, we're going to be able to see that each individual sample or vial that's associated together will be returned in the result. So I have my column for sample ID grouping together in order, and then I can see my vials along with the location and some other high-level information. With that, I have all of my functionality that exists in the box, as well as the ability to print a report, again exporting to a CSV file. And with regards to any of these vials, I could also check off the vials that, for example, I want to pull for a project or study or to run an experiment on. And then I could use this little basket icon to generate a pick list of which I could perform multiple searches, continuing to add samples and vials to my pick list. And then when I'm ready to use that pick list or maybe go retrieve those samples, I have the ability to go into my samples, groups, and sources menu and double click on my pick list. This allows users to just track and work with those samples or vials without having to worry about finding them in the boxes or in the search. And with the Enterprise Edition, we can right-click and we can also share our pick list with other users. So if you're collaborating on samples with another lab or another group, or even just a specific user, you have the ability to share the list with them. And you both can track real-time updates on those samples.